Now we're going to figure out what it takes to make your response a success, and what may be beyond your ability to control, but may be within your capability to diminish the severity of the impacts. So, you've considered who your partners are and identified them. Hopefully, you've acknowledged the resources that your partners bring to the table. You've sought their input and created an accurate risk assessment. Now, you're ready to define what resources you already have and what resources you still may need to respond to disaster. And finally, what circumstances are unavoidable and you can only mitigate or diminish their severity. Begin by choosing the top 3 or 4 hazards that are either high likelihood or high consequence events for your institution. You have to identify what you have on hand and what your limitations might be before you begin to write your plan. This process will help with resource identification and begin to build a list of needs. It makes no sense to write a plan without the resources available to accomplish the plan. Well, let's talk about how these criteria apply to your needs assessment and plan construction. Remember that SMART plan? Well, you have to simplify, because defining all the needs for the entire plan can't be accomplished all at once. Break it down so you can evaluate what it takes to accomplish each piece of the plan. How do you make it measurable? General ideas like prepare buildings for high winds doesn't create a measurable list of what it takes to make it happen. How many buildings with how many windows, of what size, require covering? How many sheets of plywood? What training courses? How many gallons of fuel or how many gallons of water? How many vehicles will be used and what will it take to keep them operating? How many staff already know CPR? And how many do we want to know CPR in a disaster? Until we know the measurable assets it requires, we don't know what's achievable and what's not, and what it requires to achieve more. You must make sure it's achievable. What is achievable for your institution? What can you do with what you have, and what else does it take to accomplish that action? Some things cannot be achieved or adversities prevented, but many things out of your control can still be mitigated or their severity diminished. It needs to be reasonable. Even if it's theoretically achievable, what can you afford? What can be acquired and what's beyond your capability? Is it reasonable to buy more animal transport vehicles in this year's budget? If not, when? How often are CPR classes available? Can you get an instructor to come to the zoo instead? How many escape routes are available? One well-known Colorado zoo is in a canyon with just one main road in and out. Can you evacuate earlier to compensate for your transport limitations? And it needs to be time sensitive. The final deadline is the disaster itself, and the clock is ticking. When can the budget afford it? How soon can the next training occur? How many can you have by hurricane season? A plan without a timetable is just a desire. Set time goals. Even if they end up being pushed forward later, that gives you a goal. How do we figure out what should be in our needs list? This process will help with existing resource identification and begin to build a list of remaining physical or human resource or logistical needs to actually accomplish the action plan. Pet abandonment is the number one reason the public cited for non-evacuation in disasters. Likewise, animal care staff may place themselves at risk for the animals unless policies and the plan priorities are clear. Remember the zookeepers who went into the gorilla enclosure to save the animals from chlorine gas? They ended up at the hospital too. It's up to you to weigh the potential safety risks to staff and to find the limitations to preserve human life. Stabilizing means prevent additional damage, decrease the safety risks. Further losses may be prevented if the right actions are taken in a timely manner. Can sandbags and pumps prevent rising water damage? Can turning off electricity prevent loss of life from electrocution? Can temporary fencing prevent further animal escapes? Animals at risk may provoke an emotional response, heroic or rash or dangerous staff actions. The proper control of human risk requires that we remember that animals are property and their safety must be addressed only within the human risk limitations. Plans should define multiple scenarios with clear guidelines for prioritization of human safety first. The ICS system, the safety officer's duty is to responders. It's the only position specifically designated with the authority to override operations until a human safety issue is already addressed. So designate a safety officer on your storm team or your daily duty roster. The commander may or may not be the best safety officer. A medical background or an electrical concern or other specialized skills, they may actually be more critical to a safety officer function than someone who's a manager or director who may actually be in command. Let's just go through a quick example of a needs assessment at a captive wildlife facility. We'll just look at a few parts of their needs assessment just so we can get us all on the same page and you'll understand what I'm talking about. We can't look at the entire plan, so we'll just focus down one step at a time from the risk assessment to creation of this needs list. The facility identified several potential risks by evaluating both the probability and the severity. Because of the geographic coastal location, the possibility of weather disasters and water pollution are real risks beyond the control of the institution. This is a limitation of their geography. They're stuck with it. However, they can mitigate or diminish the potential adverse sequelae of the event. Let's look at a hurricane as the example for their needs list. What resources already exist? What else do they need? How can they lessen or moderate the impact of these potential events? The risk of power loss is high in a hurricane. However, certain actions may be performed to deal with this eventuality. What else might be done to deal with power loss? When electricity was out due to California wildfires, the electric company would not allow generators to be turned on until they were sure that they were disconnected from the grid, because power can flow either direction and may shock the electrical repair workers in the field. So remember, to use a generator in disaster, you must ensure it is a closed circuit system. The best way to be sure it is to get your electric company partners to inspect the existing, or better yet, to advise the installation of generators to ensure they're safe to operate for everyone involved. Wind damage is highly likely in a hurricane as well. What can be done to deal with potential wind damage? What is required to accomplish these items? Water damage is one of the most common disasters resulting from not only hurricanes, but rain to mountainous terrain, snow melt, levee breaks. This is a good one on which to focus and use an example for creation of a needs list because it may be useful in many flooding scenarios. So, let's just consider what may be needed to execute the plan. As always, the first priority is human safety, of course. So what actions might be employed to keep people safe? So what do they already have to do the job, and what do they still need? Remember, partners should be involved on this to decide what's required to get the job done. Without first figuring out what's required in a measurable way, how many, how much, how long, and without an inventory of what's already on hand, then what else is needed can't even be determined. The Storm Rider team, or Disaster Response Squad, or whatever you want to call them, is a small group of staff that plays a key role in disaster. They're a discrete subset of staff with special capabilities that can be mobilized in a disaster. The Storm Rider team needs assessment may indicate that training is one of the key Storm Rider team needs if the equipment they need is available. As a small strike force, they need specialized skills over a wide range of subjects, defined roles, and clear protocols. What other criteria or special considerations might be appropriate for a storm team? The individual components of the team may require special skills, education, or leadership capability. The operations are the actual tasks to be accomplished. Much of the ability to implement the operations is dependent, though, upon both administration and logistics, as in the ICS system. Administration deals with the people and support for the human resources required to do the job. Logistics deals with the stuff you need to make everything work. The equipment, food, water, electricity. Where do you get it? How do you get it transported? Who receives it? Where does it go and who needs it? One is dependent upon the other. What is your policy in normal circumstances for firearms at your facility? Can no one carry openly or concealed weapons? Can anyone with a license carry concealed weapon? What are the considerations that you have for personal protection in disaster? Do you have a private security service on site? Can they provide disaster protection? Do you have municipal law enforcement options? Some city zoos may already have this available. Must you request it from your local authorities in advance? They're your partners. Talk to them. Do you need an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, specifically for disaster scenarios? Do you need 24-hour enhanced security? Whether your policy is no one is allowed to carry lethal force, or whether the storm team is required to have weapon access at all times, or somewhere in between, put it in writing to avoid misunderstanding in the middle of an event. Likewise, put your policies in writing for other self-defense tools. What about pepper spray, tasers, other weapons? Remember, not just weapons, but actually low-tech options like whistles may be very useful in security planning and response protocols and various action items. The Storm Rider team specific needs assessment may indicate that training is one of the key Storm Rider needs once they have the equipment they need. As a small strike force, they need specialized skills over a wide range of subjects, defined roles, and clear protocols. The team may be organized in an ICS fashion, but some might consider the entire team an operational unit. The recovery phase may be best suited for the ICS model as an ongoing process of reclamation. Many Storm Rider team requirements involve training more than equipment. Storm Rider teams may be the only people on site in a disaster. Non-essential personnel should be evacuated or dismissed anytime their safety risk becomes significant or the regional evacuation orders are issued. The Storm Rider team is composed of essential personnel. Nevertheless, their lives are also priority one as well. Communicate closely with your emergency partners and follow their mandates. A drowned, poisoned, or incinerated storm team just to save property and animals is unacceptable. Because of their need for autonomous function, some essential skills should be incorporated into the team. Because of the diverse areas of expertise required, very few individuals actually have all those skills. Therefore, critical skills must come from the composite of team member expertise. This may require additional training for team members. What other skills or expertise may be essential to a team at your facility? Overhead tram operations? Scuba certification? How about filtration or aquarium system expertise for a large aquarium? This is only one way to create a needs list. Whatever works best for you is what you should use. It could be charts, spreadsheets, Sanskrit, it doesn't matter. This chart might even add a column such as who's responsible to make it happen, or maybe a column that lists a timeline to accomplish or acquire those remaining needs. Let's look at the last row for the storm team specific needs. Remember, the storm team may be the only staff sheltering on site. The people who will be there to evaluate the ongoing situation and report the conditions. They're there to assess the damage and the security. The storm team may be the only individuals who execute the initial recovery plan, securing the safety of human life or stabilizing the situation and protecting property until further assets can arrive. Most of an institutional plan may be preparatory, before the disaster when additional human resources, equipment, and supplies are readily available. Plywood on windows, gassing up the trucks, putting animals in holding. All these are best performed when they have full community infrastructure and staff support to accomplish it before the event occurs. However, sheltering in place, the storm team will require resources that allow their autonomous function, at least for a short period, absolute minimum of 72 hours, but at least a week is recommended as a plan for a storm team capability. In New Orleans after Katrina, they had to operate for more than a month after the storm without normal resource availability. So, what are the specific needs for the storm team to work autonomously? The storm team may not have immediate access to EMS, medical attention, or even the capability of self or human evacuation. Community responders, EMS, fire and rescue, and medical personnel may be just tied up. They may be unavailable. They may be out of communication, or the roads may simply be impassable. So preserving human life is the most critical aspect of a storm team function. Remember, it may not just include medical capability. Protecting people from dangerous animals, from electrocution, from drowning, and any other threats to human life may be in the hands of this small strike force. Once human hazards have been addressed, the situation must be stabilized. Ask yourself, what can be accomplished before the event to expedite stabilization, during or post-event? What sensitive systems can be checked or altered before in anticipation of an event? Fuel storage, electrical service? Maybe install easy-to-find off switches or valves? What actions may be required post-event, and what resources are required to accomplish them? Are there specific tools, cleanup supplies, or maybe testing equipment? And who will be using those items? The storm team. The storm team may be on their own to stabilize the situation. What will they need to secure animal holding, or what do they need to turn off or redirect utilities like water and electricity? Again, preparation pre-event can enable or enhance their capability to stabilize the situation. Be sure they get fit tested for any personal protective equipment that may require it. What else can you think of that makes it easier for the storm team to stabilize the situation? Once the scene is safe and stable, what else will be required to preserve animal lives, property, and protect the environment? This may be the lead-in for recovery phase of disaster, or it may still be in the midst of a week-long flood event. What must be done to ensure a rapid return to business continuity? The scene has been secured by the storm team. What can be done in lieu of outside support and help? The storm team will be limited in capability, but what resources do they require to protect animal life and the environment? Do they have training to accomplish the actions as well? Do they have veterinary expertise, roofing repair capability? What else should be considered in the creation of your needs list? So, what's the take-home message about needs list creation and limitations? Well, once the primary risks are identified, then specific achievable actions to address each one are determined. And once the limitations beyond your control are identified, the actions to mitigate those are determined as well. Each of these actions are broken down into measurable goals, and the resources required to achieve each of them are identified. An inventory of the resources currently available or on hand is then compared to that list of resources required to achieve those. But only then can a needs list of remaining resources be calculated. The needs list will then guide you with a timeline of resource acquisition to achieve your preparation and response goals. Are you ready? Do you feel that you've identified and engaged your partners and your community? Have you assessed and identified your greatest risks? Do you know what resources you already have, and have you identified what you need to accomplish your plan? Well then, let's do it.